Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Stewardology Podcast. I'm Tyler, and I'm here with my co-host, Tim Russell.
Hey, good morning.
And Drew Gysi.
Hey.
The world is moving towards being a cashless society. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. My wife and I went to a soccer game, a professional soccer game recently, and I brought $50 in my wallet. I was like, this is going to cover, some food for us. And I thought I had it all planned out. I had cash in my wallet to pay for food at this game. Well, I order the food. I was like, yes, $48, $12 drinks. Like, it's ridiculous how expensive it is. But I get there and I get to the register and I'm like, all right, came in under budget. Here's a $50 bill. Oh, sir, we don't take cash. You don't take cash? What am I supposed to do? And I had to put it on my card and it messed everything up. And I was kind of grumbling about it for the rest of the day. And Sarah wasn't too happy about it. But this got me thinking, how do we as stewards function in an increasingly cashless society? A lot of people use cash as a budgeting tool, and that might be going away in some capacity here. And I know there's a lot of people that are fearmongers, a lot of news outlets, or people that are trying to sell you snake oil that are trying to get you scared by saying cash is going away, it's going to go crazy. But we also don't want to go that far either. We don't want to fall off of either side of the bench. So how should we adapt while staying faithful as stewards? That's the conversation I want to get into today.
Well, first of all, I think it sounds like we should start with you need some therapy and some counseling, maybe work over those low-level anger issues.
Oh man, I was so ready. I was like, I had this, and I wasn't going to mess up the online thing, and nope, didn't work.
Well, if you need to get rid of that 50, I am. Just hand it over.
Come on, he deposited in his bank account.
Yeah, I had to make up for the fact that I had to spend 50 out of the bank account.
He made up the difference. Well, so how should we understand the shift to a cashless society? So I think the first thing we have to recognize is that your experience is actually incredibly relevant. By and large, most places in the country, and frankly, in many places around the world, cash is almost a inconvenience. I went to England 2 years ago, and I was recently there. And while I was there, I figured I'd have to go to the ATM to get out cash for various needs. Never once did I have to pull out my ATM card to go to the ATM machine. Everything was cashless. So tap and pay when you get on the subway, tap and pay when you get on the buses, tap and pay when you go to a restaurant, tap and pay when you go to everything. And let's face it, it was as an international traveler, it was so convenient. I loved it. But there are downsides, right? The downside to just tap and pay everything and not actually pulling out cash is, as studies have shown, we tend to spend more. So we spend more because we have a different psychological reality or experience when we pull out some green paper from our wallet and plunk it down for something. We have fewer green dollars left in our wallet, as opposed to just swipe and pay or tap and pay. Everything's done. It's just ones and zeros. It feels less real. So I think philosophically, we can understand the benefits, the advantages of having cashless arrangements, but also recognize that there are inherent stewardship. I'll call it a trap or a danger, that if we just spend willy-nilly, pretend like like there's no difference between cash and card or cashless, that we're just, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, and there, I think there's some incentives too for both private business and government to push this way. And what I want to be careful of is a lot of people might get scared of this and call it some sort of mark of the beast or sign of end times and all this stuff. Let's not go there right now. Let's just talk about like why would it make sense for a private business or even government to push in this direction? Obviously, from the private business end, there's probably more accurate bookkeeping. If everything's done electronically, it's just easier to track. But number two, it's more convenient for them as a business to make sales, with online sales and point of sale when you're at maybe you're at a conference or maybe just in a store. It's just easier to buy things, just boop, and there you go. But for a lot of people immediately think of government. Why would government push for a more cashless society?
Well, I mean, you can identify transactions more clearly. You know who's spending what, and you have an idea about what kind of thing they're spending that money on.
It's the creep of Big Brother.
It is a little bit, yes.
I'm not saying it is, but it's the creep toward that Big Brother piece.
No, I don't think you're wrong to say that it's Big Brother. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So if we can see the transactions, then theoretically, then they can see, spot, and prevent fraudulent transactions, criminal transactions, prevent money laundering, prevent money from being sent to or provided to criminal organizations, terrorist organizations. The U.S. Patriot Act and all of the various financial regulations that have come out of 9/11 and the reaction to 9/11 is all about being able to know your customer, know where the money's coming from, know who the money's going to, and be able to prevent money from getting into the hands of bad actors. Yeah, so from a government standpoint, that makes entire sense. If you're trying to prevent funding an organization that's trying to destroy you, it makes sense that the government would want to stop that. Now, the problem is that where does the line stop between an organization that wants to destroy you versus a political opponent whom you don't like and who they don't like you, and who's saying mean things about you or tweeting mean things about you, right? There's a fine line there. And the concern, I think, is that maybe that line could be blurred a little bit.
And it's also a data collection piece. There's so much data collection on this, and it's not just what's being spent and where's it being spent and who is spending, but it's also locational. I mean, go back to what was happening back when they stormed the Capitol. Yeah. Bank of America, if I understand right, gave access to the government. They said, "Oh, these people were purchasing in this area," and cell phone companies.
Yeah, you're talking about like January 6th.
January 6th,
and they provided all the financial transactions to
financial
anyone.
Transactions and cell phone pinging and all this other stuff.
Voluntarily provided that to the government.
Voluntarily, which still that's up in the air.
Aren't they great patriots?
Yes, of course they are.
So we've got that. There's another aspect is if there's money that's going underneath the table, you can't tax it. And you can't enforce taxation. And that's probably the most important reason the government's pushing a cashless society. If they can see transactions, they can see things that look like compensation, they have much more better chance of being able to get you to pay taxes on that compensation. We're seeing that with things like Venmo and eBay and some of these other organizations, these cash payment organizations. They're now required to send out tax forms if you receive more than a certain dollar amount within a year's time. And that's forcing people who maybe, reimbursing or paying for rent or doing something, something else. Like you're not paying your landlord rent, but maybe you and two other roommates are pooling your money together and one person's paying that rent check, but you're giving it to your roommate. That's not taxable income to the roommate.
Right.
It creates all kind of added complications now. They want to see all of these things so they can track it. Let's face it though. Being able to tax things that are legitimate taxable objects, I'm not entirely opposed to. I certainly don't like all of the complications and the Big Brother aspects of that, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so there are some potential benefits, though, right? So there's government likes the cashless society because of tax compliance. You can identify and eliminate criminal activity. You can potentially control your population. You can even potentially manipulate your population. There's a crisis management aspect to it. We can hopefully stimulate the economy better by sending money to people's bank accounts. That's what happened during COVID.
Yeah, we saw that happen.
And also we have it's trendy among the nations. All the cool kids are doing it. So, we get that. So the government pushes for cashless society, but there are potential benefits other than the ones that the government's looking at.
Well, let me jump in on one that I see, because I do a lot of travel with Life Institute.
Please.
And it is like big time convenience. I am on the road a lot. This past year, a lot of seminars we've done, and to be able to have to carry the amount of cash I need to cover expenses, I mean, my pockets would be bulging. And to be able to have, hey, Tim, thank you so much for the company credit card. Appreciate that. That makes it so much easier to be able to take it, put it on that. Now, we have budgets. We work within those budgets. We know where our lines are, but it makes it so much easier, and it helps us with our accounting and tracking and everything, keeps things smooth and simple. The convenience of doing things in that way is phenomenal. Now, I still carry some cash with me. I make sure that there's some tipping that takes place at airports and other things, which I want to make sure that I take care of, because these people are doing a little bit of work for me. Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to take care of them. And I'm not seeing the Venmo or the credit card.
They have that in a lot of places now. They'll have like a
starting
tap
to see
tips.
that. Starting to see that right now.
Yeah, QR code to leave a tip.
Yeah, I'm still a little leery about some of that stuff. A little bit of cash in my pocket, but I've been carrying the same amount of cash in my pocket, give or take, for a couple years now. I probably got a bill in my pocket that's probably been in there for a couple years, because I don't use it that much anymore. The convenience of having that credit card or debit card, my wife and I live off of a debit card also, that helps us out so well.
So from a convenience standpoint, I've got a different perspective. Because my wife, as a midwife serving the Amish community, you would be surprised about how much cash is actually provided for payments. It's not an uncommon thing to have to go to the bank and deposit several $1,000s worth of hundreds, 50s, 20s. You get a little stack of money, and there's a convenience factor for just the business. Like, you've got to take a team member out of the office to go to the bank to go get that money in. If it's a check, you scan the check and it's in. There's no inconvenience. The minimal inconvenience factor. If someone pays with a credit card, a debit card, a Venmo, which people pay for services through those means, it's so much easier. There's nothing that has to be done on the back end. So there's a convenience factor for the business as well. So you were talking about going to a soccer game, and at the soccer game, they don't accept cash. It's for them, it's a convenience factor, because it managing the cash, counting the cash, how to deal with overages and underages, the security risk of both holding the cash during operation hours, transporting cash after hours, getting it into the bank, the time and cost of that. It's a complete drag. It really is. And now that we're allowed to charge customers for the convenience factor of credit card, like it's a little bit more convenient, frankly, to just charge credit cards and allow the processing fee to be covered by the person who's paying with the card. So yeah, from a convenience factor, there are a lot of ways in which it can be inconvenient to use cash.
Well, I'll take it back in the day. I used to work for an oil company. I ran different gas stations, and it was not uncommon at one of my stations to go through $40,000 in cash a day.
Yeah.
And I had to sit there and count it all by hand. Yeah. And then I had to take it, and literally I walked it over to the bank. It was just like half a block away. So, but that's $40K. That's a lot of money, and it was a lot of time to count all that. So I understand the idea of having using credit cards at a time and debit cards, to me, the convenience and the savings of time and effort and even money is very valuable.
So we got some really great convenience factors, right? It's convenient, it's fast, maybe a little bit more secure. You're not carrying around wads of cash, and it could be more transparent for bookkeeping's sake. There's also some potential risks there. Loss of privacy. If everything's marked on an electronic sheet, there's no privacy there. Possible increased third-party control over your finances. Cybersecurity threats. I just got a text last night from KeyBank thinking that my normal Apple bill was a fraud, and I was like, no, I need that. Like, don't pause that transaction. But that's good, right? They're protecting me from some of that. But there's loss of anonymity there. There's potential for social credit systems. This is where you kind of get into this conspiracy
the China
theory
process,
or even China. They do that, where your financial privileges could be reduced based on maybe your worldview or actions that.
Well, we saw that in Canada with the trucker strike. We saw that they actually started messing with their finances.
Yeah, it's a little closer to home than Canada, perhaps.
Yes, for sure. So let's play the mind game for a second, right? If cash does disappear, who controls your money? There's three different things here: government, banks, and payment processors. How do those factors play in? How would a government control your money? Well, there's monetary policy control. You could be instantly fined. I know, Tim, you have a story from Europe, I think, where was it a cup of coffee that you poured out in the...
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah, yes.
So I'm in London. We're flying home, and we get an Uber to take us to the airport. He gets a cup of coffee from this really nice hotel, and I'm drinking it in it's like a BMW electronic vehicle, brand new. It's really expensive vehicle, and it's all white interior. I'm sitting there with a cup of coffee. I'm like, this coffee is the worst coffee I've ever tasted. It is so bad.
And Tim's a coffee connoisseur.
It is so bad. So I'm halfway through, and I'm like, I can't choke any more of this down. But I don't want to leave it in the car and spill it all over and make a mess. So we're stopped at a light. There's traffic all around. I roll down the window, take the lid off, and go, boop, just on the side of the road. It's just coffee. All it is coffee. Oh my word, the Uber driver freaked out. What are you doing? What are you doing? Don't pour anything. You can't pour anything. I'm like, I have the coffee cup right here. I didn't drop the cup. I just poured out the contents. They're going to fine me 50 pounds. A 50-pound fine for pouring water out on the street. It's considered litter.
Wow.
And she goes, there are cameras everywhere. They'll see it. They'll see my license plate, and they'll mail me a bill, a fine. Can you imagine? What kind of psychotic controls do you have to have as a government to be concerned about coffee being poured out on the street and sending people? Think about the cost to employ people, to watch cameras, to find things, and to send out bills and invoices. And I'm sure they can, through AI, maybe shorten that and find stuff, but that's just so stupid. My job is to send people fines for littering.
Pouring out my bean water.
In England, they're not on the verge of Big Brother. It sounds like they're there.
Oh, it's so bad.
It
really is. She was like, yeah. I got a fine from the government once because it was late and I was new to England, and I put paper mail in the trash can, and the guy going to collect my trash saw it through the bag, ripped open my trash, rummaged through, found out it was me, and then they mailed me a fine for not recycling a piece of paper.
Note to self: do not choose to remove
it is not the land
US
of the free over
citizenship
there.
to go to
not.
live in England.
It's not.
We won that battle in 1776.
1776, yes.
You were in history
Well, that was
class.
the Declaration of
Yeah,
Independence. I
we
don't know
didn't
if
win the battle until 1780 something. But anyway, different podcast, different time. But there's risks of not only instant fines, but deplatforming. I mean, you've seen this kind of even in our own country where people, they do something that's not popular in the popular context, and they're deplatformed. Their social media account is removed. They get canceled.
If you question the government's narrative over a thing. Yes.
Exactly. So there's government factors here. There's also bank control, which obviously I think most people understand this already, but if banks control your money, essentially, if cash disappears entirely, they might have even more control over your funds. Banking fees increase and all that fun stuff.
And again, not conspiracy theory, but they can shut off the access to your credit card. So that can be done. So they, as you're saying, full custody over funds, they have full custody over your card.
Yeah. There's also payment processors. This is an interesting thing. Over the last couple of years with Second Amendment debates and gun control happening, I've noticed that there's been stories where payment processors have stopped processing payments for people that want to buy like certain parts of firearms from certain manufacturers, for example, in the United States. So they'll be like, nope, not letting you do that. And so there was a whole court case taken up to fight that. But it's getting down to like even basic Bill of Rights violations, right? So very interesting stuff. And again, we're saying this not to like peak the tinfoil hat wearing people. We're not trying to do this, but it's just the reality that, hey, this is something, these things could happen. But later on in this episode, we're going to talk about how to live in light of these things.
Yeah.
So dangers of government control. Here's what you'll hear from the fearmongers, right? So be careful. Here's what you're going to fear. If Christians rely on the government for financial transactions, they could be pressured to comply with policies that violate their faith or risk losing access to money. Certainly something that could happen. You've seen this happen in China, for example, in some cases. But in the U.S., we're not really there. We're not there yet. Some Christian ministries, churches, and individuals have already faced debanking, basically being denied financial services due to their beliefs. I think we saw this with some of the Canadian, you mentioned earlier.
The trucker situation, the trucker protests that happened where they shut down their access to their own personal banking.
Yeah, that's wild. And then like if you're really going crazy, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, they could be programmed to restrict what people are allowed to spend money on, giving certain types of organizations restrictions and stuff like that. Again, we're not really there yet in the U.S., but what are your thoughts on that, Tim?
Well, I mean, it's entire centralized control over where money can flow. So instead of a free and open society, free and open economy, it is an economy where the government has the ability to shut off channels of money flow. No. You can't give money to these kind of organizations because any number of reasons. They could be because they're criminal or because we don't like them. That's the reality.
They're considered like hate organizations.
Yes.
We define what that is.
Exactly.
And that's the interesting thing. They will define what that is, and that could embody Christian organizations because we are very focused on gospel-centered and biblically based aspects, preaching, teaching. And that could shut down generosity to a church or generosity to a ministry that may not fit the mainstream of society if it's going a certain direction with different social aspects where they're staying true to gospel-centered, one man, one woman marriage. That could really shut down generosity to these ministries, organizations, and churches.
So when the Ukraine-Russia war flared up, right, the governments of the world basically cut off Russia, cut off all financial transactions to Russia. Essentially, what that caused is that you couldn't actually support Christian ministries operating in Russia because of fear that maybe you're going to be supporting the Putin regime and their attack against the free people of Ukraine. So that's another example of one of the ways there are unintended consequences, perhaps, of over government control or overly robust government control over financial transactions, which couldn't happen if we had a cash-based society. But because we're cashless, these kinds of things are possible.
Well, that's a good transition, Tim. What are your immediate thoughts? Will the government ever really get rid of cash? Look into your crystal ball.
So I can absolutely foresee within decades that could maybe happen.
Yeah, paper cash being gone.
Paper cash, yeah. If we're talking about a centralized digital currency, central bank digital currency, I think that's likely to happen. I hope it doesn't. I think it's going to be a very bad thing. but it's entirely possible. So I also hope we don't go to a cashless society in terms of literally no paper bills, no coins. I think that would be a dangerous and negative thing.
Are there any, because I'm naive to this, any countries out there that are operating totally cashless today?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think probably not, but it's possible.
Yeah,
we can ask the old Google machine.
The
See what
Google
the Google machine says.
knows a lot of stuff. So
Tyler's typing away. I don't know.
So there are, according to the immediate results on Google, there are no countries that are currently operating completely cashless.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So breathe.
Yes.
Breathe.
Now, that's today. Tomorrow
today.
can be a different story.
exactly.
Yeah. I was listening to a Ramsey show, and some people have thoughts on that, but I really appreciated his take on this topic, because he was like, "Well, think about what you do right now. Most of what you do isn't with like paper cash.
It's all cashless anyway.
You know what I mean? Like when you pay your mortgage, it's just you're moving digits from one account to another. You're paying your credit card bill. You're moving digits from this account to that account.
Right.
You pay your mortgage, or whatever it is. I could actually say one time I paid my credit card bill with cash. I went to the Chase Bank and was like, "Can I pay my credit card bill, please?" And they're like, "Why are you here?" So I did that because it was just more convenient. I had cash on me and I didn't feel like going like putting it in. But anyway, yeah, like most of what you do is already digital. You've made it this far, so just take a breath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that, because the reality is the vast majority of our lives are cashless. I happen to get like a cash allowance. I use cash for allowance purposes in our home, but even that's inconvenient, because if we use that allowance, oftentimes it's done through a card or buying something online. Therefore, I've got to take that money back to the bank and deposit it, just to cover that bill. Yeah. So, is it a big deal? It is if you don't act as a wise steward. It's a big deal. So here's how do you survive biblically in this kind of environment as a steward. I think you have to recognize the inherent dangers of operating with as little friction as possible with your money. Now, businesses want frictionless transactions. They want to remove every obstacle for you saying yes. Let's face it, that's good business. What's good business may not necessarily be good stewardship on your end, or may not lead to good stewardship on your end. So what do we need to do? I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we're going to be tempted to spend more if we don't spend with cash, which isn't necessarily a bad thing to be tempted by that. I think it is a bad thing to spend without consideration, to spend without evaluation and intention.
Well, I think the big picture really is not, when it comes to stewardship, not how you are spending, but how you are managing what you have. I think that's what it comes down to, because whether you're going to swipe, tap, or use your phone, you're still going to make that transaction. The question is, how are you managing what's happening behind the scenes with your budget, with what your expenses are? Like you said, Tim, you're going to have some cash allowance every month, but you're going to probably put that on a card or a debit card or whatever. Now you got to put that money back into the account to take care of things. Yeah. So it's the management of it. The wise steward needs to think through that, because they need to make sure that they have what they need to be able to pay those bills today and in the future.
So I think it means that we need to be very aware of impulse spending decisions.
Yeah.
That when we feel the impulse to just buy something, you're scrolling on Facebook or Instagram and you see an ad, and the ad's for something really cool, and you click on the link and you go to the website and you look around and say, hey, that's pretty cheap, and add that to my cart, and hey, $130 later.
Yeah.
You're walking out of there with, something that you hope will eventually be shipped to you that you'll be able to get. Avoid those impulse control moments. And I say that not just to you guys or to our listening audience. I say it to myself because I would be wise to slow down, the velocity of money in my budget. Do you guys know what the concept of velocity of money is? It's an economic term.
Why don't you explain that? Because I don't think many people have heard of that term.
The velocity of money is how quickly money moves through our economy. You get paid. So let's just back up the bus for a minute and just look at the sequence. Your business pays you a paycheck. You get that paycheck and you put it in your checking account. You usually spend that money within a month. Most people do. Mortgage, pay it for your credit card bills, or you put it on your spending, gas, things like that. Giving money to the babysitter to take care of your kids. You've got all of these various expenses, and the money goes from you to them. Now, what do they do with that money? Well, so your neighbor gets the money for payment that you made to buy her kid's hoagie for, some school fundraiser, where they take that money and, they go and give it to the hoagie company. The hoagie company takes it and buys their supplies, and that money flows through the next thing. And so there's a velocity of money. There's a speed at which the money moves through the economy. And economists think that an economy works best when the velocity of money, the speed at which money moves through the economy, is quick. Because with $1, we can enrich any number of lives within a month or a year. That money's going to change hands multiple times. And that's actually a good thing. But in our budget context, the velocity of money is one area that we need to pay attention to and slow it down. Hold on to your money longer. Control where your money goes. Have an emergency reserve. Spend off of a budget. Make sure that your spending decisions are principled and purposeful. This is how we can actually help to control how quickly the money goes in one hand and then out the other. We want to slow that down.
So the goal in a personal budget is not to have your money at the velocity speed of what's happening in the economy, but in the velocity speed of what you want in your own home.
Sure. I also think that saying it that way is maybe not something that your average steward is going to wrap their head around. I don't know what it means, that the average velocity of money in my home. I don't know what that means. But I do think what that means, frankly, is that when you get money, your goal is to hold on to it, not to spend it. So what this doesn't mean is that you should spend everything on credit card. That way you can have a longer float. Are you familiar with the idea of the float? I'm not talking about a float. The velocity of money is not encouraged by a float. You may hold on to your money longer, but you're building your debt in the process. You have to pay that off. That's the opposite of what I'm talking about. Hold that money in reserve. Don't spend it, not even on credit cards that you're paying off at the end of the month. Don't spend all of your income.
It's a novel idea.
Spend less than you earn. That's what I'm referring to. Spend less than you earn.
Savings.
Well, yeah, it's more than just savings, though. It's simply not living a consumptive lifestyle.
Yeah. And self-control and patience and all of that.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely.
For sure. Well, there's some points that we have down in our outline for today. That's biblical wisdom on being prepared. And some people will think of this whole cashless society thing and put the tinfoil hats on and be like, what do I do to prepare? How do I do this? And some of this is actually a little easier than you'd think.
It's not building the bunker in the backyard?
No, it's not building the bunker.
Although that'd be pretty cool.
That would be, honestly, like...
With the tinfoil hat on, build the bunker.
Your neighbors will think you're nuts, but that might be pretty cool.
That ship's gone.
But instead of focusing on stockpiling gold or ammunition or whatever it is you think is going to save you in uncertain times, what if we stockpiled some scripture in our minds and use that to feed our faith instead of fear and uncertainty?
That's a great point.
And Tim, you said something as we were thinking about this episode, and it really stuck with me. You said what you fear might tell you about what you are trusting in.
Yes.
And I thought that was just really well said. So let's take off the tinfoil hats for a second and remind ourselves that God is a lot bigger than this. Let's remember that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church of Christ. Right?
Amen.
So what are some practical verses we can leave our audience with today?
I think there are many that could be really helpful. I think the first one I'd say is Proverbs 6:6-8. It says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having a chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in the summer and gathers her food for harvest. So why is this verse, I think, important for us to keep in mind in the context? Have reserves. Don't spend it all. Store up, save, prepare for winter. Do the saving for winter while it's still summer. So, the saying, make hay while the sun shines? It's the same idea. While the Lord is giving you strength and energy, we do need to be saving and preparing for the times when there will be less, there will be lack. It's not a sign of faithlessness to have savings. It is a sign of faith to have savings. What did God call Joseph to do? He said, you are going to have 7 years of abundance, therefore save, because there are 7 years of lack that is coming. That applies to us. So while the Lord is giving you strength and health, save, prepare, work hard, and don't live on all of your income.
There's another verse that I really appreciate. It's the Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender.
Yep.
This reminds me, don't depend excessively on authorities or debt or loans or whatever it is you think you're going to need to get by. And this isn't also to say be completely self-sufficient either. But exercise wisdom in that. Like don't be taking out loans just to fund your ammunition stockpile or whatever it is you think you'd need. Rely on the Lord.
Buy your ammo in cash.
That's right.
I mean, or at least, not on debt.
With your debit card.
or just make your own in your basement. I know some guys that do that.
Yeah.
So another good verse is 1 Thessalonians 5:6. It says, so then let us not sleep as others do, but let us keep awake and be sober. This gives us a good concept of having discernment, especially in these changing times. We don't know how things are going to be changing in these upcoming years. Things are moving at such a lightning pace right now, where what happened just a few years ago was a foreign concept even years earlier. So we need to just use wisdom and understanding as the times are changing, and let's just stay on our knees in prayer through this whole process.
Mm-hmm. One final verse would be Ecclesiastes 11:2. And Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, divide your portion among 7, or portion to 7, even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. So the application here is be diversified. Don't be just like, I'm just going to buy guns and ammo and food. Like,
why are you pointing at me, Tim?
I've heard stories. No, just kidding.
We've seen video.
We've gotta be careful not to just go all gold or all Bitcoin, or maybe I would even go so far as saying all stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Yeah,
be diversified. Have real estate, have investment accounts, IRAs and Roth IRAs, and they should be invested in the market. It's okay to have some gold and some currency. It's okay to have some cash, actual physical paper bills. It's not a bad idea to have resources and reserves. Don't just be all one thing. That's a danger.
Yeah. So as we wind down, I think just some practical steps for us. Number one was just stay financially literate. Understand what's happening when you make a transaction with a credit card. You know that there's a fee being charged, being passed on to you most likely, and you're the one covering it. And also understand that when you have all your money in cash, you fall victim to inflation. Mm-hmm. So there's a number of things you have to understand to navigate wisely this world that we're living in. And one way that you can do that is actually by scheduling a free personal stewardship review with our team. This is a time where you can sit down for 90 minutes or less, or whatever you need, to really understand your financial picture, know your goals. You have this idea in your mind of what you want to achieve, and you probably also have a good understanding of the roadblocks that are keeping you from those goals. And so this meeting could be really good to help you navigate, how do I get past these roadblocks and meet the goals that I have and achieve those goals? So stay financially literate, understand what you're dealing with. Drew, you mentioned using digital tools. What are your thoughts on that?
Big time. I would definitely, without a doubt, say start using digital tools for tracking. And it's not just, here's what a lot of people do. They use their digital tools for tracking only. It's only looking back in hindsight. You need to have a budget so you know how much you can spend. There's a lot of different tracking and budgeting pieces out there. I've only, in my almost just short of 10 years of doing this, working with Life Institute, one couple and one individual, and the brother and the individual, it's brother and sister, they're the only ones that are using a online software app that they're actually using the budget aspect. Everybody else that I've seen use it, they just use it for tracking.
They're using it properly. Yeah, they're using it to do
the
proper
only
budgeting.
3 people that are doing it, they're using it for budgeting and tracking, and they're using it in such a wise way. I had very little to be able to speak into them because they were checking every box. But most people, when they set this up, they are just using it for tracking. They're looking back in hindsight. So I would say build out a budget so you know the lane you need to stay in. And then from there, once you have that lane, then you start doing the track it. Put spending limits on things. That's what you need to do. You can put a spending limit on your debit card if that's what you need to do. Freeze and disable credit cards because that's going to cause you to overspend in certain areas. And maybe you need some accountability, whether it's your spouse, which I would always say number one choice, or it may be a family member. Could be someone in your church that has good financial savvy. Reach out to them and see if they can come alongside and give you counsel and help. But then again, as you mentioned, we can come alongside also through our stewardship reviews.
Yeah, I think just the last 2 things here in our list of tips. Number 1 is trusting God's provision and not necessarily the financial system. Now, we have to use the infrastructure we've been given. It's just the way that we operate in our society. But don't put all of your eggs in that basket thinking that that's going to be your savior, because it's God that saves and God alone.
Amen.
So at the end of the day, we have to trust that God will take care of us and not the dollars in our bank account. It's not our Messiah. The dollars are not the Messiah. And lastly, I think it's tempting for people to think like, I'm gonna stick it to the government by not reporting things and try to like get around what I'm like, maybe taxes and stuff like that.
Operate under the table. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think it's important as Christian stewards that we have to operate with integrity. We have to operate. God calls us to be shrewd. He calls us to be faithful. Right. So we have to operate with faithfulness and integrity.
And we're also to pay our taxes. We see that throughout Scripture.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely part of that. So a cashless society may change how we transact, but it doesn't change our call to be faithful stewards. Are you managing money wisely in this digital age? I know it can be a lot, but your stewardship today will impact your tomorrow. So be wise. Things are going to change, and that's okay. But at the end of the day, being a wise steward is what's important as we navigate this whole cashless topic. Operate with integrity, operate with wisdom. One way that you can learn a little bit more about being a wise steward is through our book. Tim wrote a book recently called The Good Steward. It's a way that we can understand what the Bible says about how to manage our money. And the best thing is about this book is you don't need to be some kind of financial guru to understand it. It's actually for, people who don't know much about money. It's for people that know a lot about money. Either way, if you want to become a better steward, check out The Good Steward by Tim and Roy Russell. It'll be in the link in our show notes.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us in today's episode of the Stewardology Podcast. If you have ideas for future shows, go to stewardologypodcast.com/idea and share those ideas with us. Take advantage of your free stewardship review. Tyler just told us about that. Go to stewardologypodcast.com/review. And consider giving us a rating and review on your favorite podcast catcher. It's incredibly helpful for others to be able to find this content and become even better stewards. So help out your fellow brother by letting them know about the value you're finding in this podcast. And then finally, go to our show notes page, stewardologypodcast.com, for show notes for today's episode and all of our back a large back episode or back catalog of episodes. We've got a lot of phenomenal content that'll help you grow in your stewardship journey. Until next time, take care, God bless, and remember, carry your cash with you, pay with cash if you can, and maybe look to make sure you have some protection so that someone doesn't try to steal it from you. At the end of the day, trust the Lord. He's got your back. God bless.
Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.